This is TLDC. Some of you know me already. I've been here before and I've presented before, which is really nice. Others of you I'm going to be a little bit new to. So Louise, hi. Susan, hi. Welcome everybody. Today we are chatting about live online learning. That's what TLDC is all about today. And Jane, hello, lovely to see you here. Hello, Martin, great to have you here too. We've got the chat window that you can use, and we are going to have a little play with what's going on. And Annette, hello as well. Now, I'm being told the webcam quality isn't that great. Hopefully it's okay for you. We will see how that goes. Let me do some introductions. First of all, this is me. My name is Jo Cook, and I specialise in webinars and virtual classrooms. So some of you have met me before, and it's really nice to be back here today talking everything live online. This is a Q&A session. And also we have in the chat somebody called Mike. Now, Mike is the business operations manager here at Lightbulb Moment. He's also my brother. So if you hear any arguing, that's the reason why. Hey, J-Rock, lovely to have you here. You've made some very nice comments already. And Louise is saying the video quality looks okay. That's good. So Mike is here. He will be able to answer your questions too. Also, what he's going to do, he's going to be at my beck and call, which would be awesome to go and get hyperlinks and share all sorts of things with you. I also wanted to say a huge thank you to Louise and the TLDC group. It's been a little while since I've hosted a TLDC, and I'm really glad to be back here with the community. Really nice. And thank you, Louise, again, for letting us just kind of mash this up and have a little play. So let's just make sure we know how to use the tools we've got available to you. Chat is always super busy. I will try and keep up with it. Mike will let me know in case I miss anything important. So please do use that amongst yourselves. Go and share things, go and chat to each other and use emoticons as much as you like. Also, what you might notice towards the bottom left of your chat window, there's a little ask a question hyperlink. If you click that, a box will pop up. That's where to put the questions. This is a question and answer session. I literally have no material to give to you unless you ask me questions. And that's the box to do it with. If you type questions in there, I'll do my best to answer them. Also, once there are questions, you can vote them up so we can try and get to the ones that are going to be the most important. And at this point then, it really is over to your questions. And I can't see any in there at the moment. Come on, guys, there's a few of you here already. Also, we can definitely use that chat as well if we want to. So first of all, I just want to say it's about live online learning, and that's different from e-learning, which is usually self-paced click next modules. It's also different from online learning. Online learning is a much broader concept that could be a MOOC, a massive open online course. It could include what's on your LMS, your learning management system. It's also part of blended learning, which is bits of everything together. Now, live on learning specifically is much more about webinars, virtual instructor-led training, virtual classrooms. There's all kind of variety of how we can look at that. So let's have a look at some of your questions. We've got one from the lovely J-Rock. Thank you, Jonathan. How long should a virtual instructor-led training be? I'm trying to convert an NEO that was a full day, 8-hour thing. So let J-Rock know in the chat window, should we do full 8 hours live online? Now, we could do that, Jonathan, and if you had the right design, the right delivery, if you had enough breaks and activities in there, you could do it. But just because you can do it, of course, doesn't mean that you should do it. And Jonathan's just sharing NEO is new employee orientation, so an induction. Thank you. And I think that could be a little bit long, depending on what your activities are within it. If it was just a 1 day, 8-hour thing that you were then turning into a VILT, a virtual instructor-led training, I would be looking at, can we split that into 2 morning sessions, for instance, of 4 hours each? Could we split that into 2-hour sections? Maybe that would be better, kind of across 4 mornings, for instance. That might be a better way of looking at that in terms of kind of what's best for people to take in. It depends. We've had clients during this COVID-19 sort of pandemic that's been going on, where they have had to do that one day because that's what's scheduled, that's what's been in the diary for months, there's no other time to do it, etc. And so they've had to do it. If you have to, it's about having really good breaks. And that's a good kind of 15 minutes here and there to make sure people have time away from the screen to refresh. But it's also about making sure it's not just lecture, because everybody's going to get bored with that after 8 hours. So your activities are going to be really important. And in the chat window, Kathy, hi Kathy, and thank you, says, I always advocate to never go over 4 hours regardless. So Kathy's got a full kind of hard stop on that. And I think that makes a certain amount of sense, because there's only so long that really we want to sit in one chair if we can help it. Kim is saying, can you have part of it be self-study? So then kind of come together for the discussion. And that's what I say, virtual classrooms or webinars, they're live for a reason, just like today is live. The whole point is to interact and have the conversation. So that's been really good. And Jane is saying similar, I've just been asked if I can deliver my one-day face-to-face online in one day. So it's like, well, yes, we can. But is that the best way to do something? And they're sort of different things. Okay, so thank you very much. And breaking it up, says Jonathan, is what he's kind of trying to do. So that all sounds absolutely brilliant. And thank you for your question. Let's move to our next question. Va or VA, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Thank you for your question. I'm planning a series of live online webinars for learners in low-income countries. What ideas can I incorporate that will ensure that they get a great experience? What an amazing question, and a really good project to be doing as well. Thank you, Kim, for the note about my video. So again, in the chat, what can we do to help that? What can we think about in terms of people in low-income countries and making sure that they get a great experience? Now, I think what we need to think about is, if they're in a low-income country, what does that actually mean in terms of webinars? So I would be thinking in terms of, does it affect your bandwidth? So do they have broadband bandwidth? Do they have high speed? Or are they maybe on a cell phone? Because if they're on a cell phone or a mobile device across maybe a 4G signal, that will be a very different kind of experience. There might be elements to do with, are they in situations whereby they're going to be distracted, such as, are they working parents maybe, or are they doing something whilst at work? Or, you know, we even had on our community recently somebody say they had somebody join their virtual session whilst driving in a car. So are these the kind of things that we're going to be working with? And Virginia, thank you for telling me your name. So we need to know a little bit more about what those limitations actually are in order to be able to answer them. Kim says if they're using cell phones, maybe using some augmented reality. Now that sounds like fun. It's not an area I'm especially involved with. So that's something I can't really comment on, but it might be something that's useful depending on what your topic is. What I would be thinking about in terms of bandwidth and maybe screen size, if people are on cell phones or smaller tablets, is making sure that your slides, if you use them, are really low in file size, so there's not so much to transfer in your bandwidth. Also making sure all of your text is really big, really clear, your wording is clean. English might be a second language, or you might be delivering in different languages, and therefore translating that could be an issue. The other thing I would do with regard to your interaction is make sure you ask as many questions as possible, And as much as possible, think about how they're going to respond. So if, for instance, they are on cell phones, that's quite a small screen. It's not so easy to do lots of typing. So maybe you need lots of questions where they can use a thumbs up or a hand up or a green check mark kind of icon, or use something with a whiteboard, but use the kind of annotation tools to be quite big marks to interact with that. So I think that's some stuff to get you going there, Virginia. And obviously, if you've got more on that, you can add more questions or put something in the chat. So what have we got next? We've got an upvote on one from Luis. Luis says, what are the must-have tools needed for successful online training? Oh, loving that question, Luis. So I'm going to go down the tech route with this. I think that's what you're asking me. And of course, if it's not, you can let me know in chat. The first one, of course, is going to be connection. And you need to have a wired connection. None of this Wi-Fi stuff. It's just not stable enough for what you want to do. Especially what you'll hear is lots of people saying, oh, the audio drops out. I can't hear everything you're saying. Maybe the webcam quality isn't very good. And that can be to do with your bandwidth, to do with what your internet speed is. So having a wired connection would be really, really good. And obviously as fast internet as is technically possible where you are, or is what you can afford. Another tool that you'll need is some kind of computer. You can run your sessions off of a tablet. I don't ever advise it. And Mike, I think we chatted about this in our epic podcast. So if you could go and grab a link to that, please. Mike and I did like a 90-minute podcast, which normally I would say you should never do. But we wanted to cover a little bit of everything so that people who were going through challenging times going live online had a little bit of everything they needed to get going. I think you need a decent computer. What's a decent computer? You need to have a look up at your platform, whether it's Crowdcast, Connect, Zoom, and they'll give you some specifications that are minimum. But kind of the better the computer, then the easier it will be for you to use. You also need your platform, but that's more software. You need a headset. So you'll notice actually I'm not using a headset today. I've got a desktop microphone and I've got computer speakers that I use, but I'm doing this all day, every day. So I've invested a fair amount of money in the kit. You don't have to do that. You can buy a $35 headset, and I really love the Logitech ones. They're my favorite ones to go and use. And as long as you've got something that you can hear good quality and you can sound good, that's really important. The reason a headset is good is because it drowns out other noises and it means that your audio goes with you. If I start talking over here, my audio is a different quality because my microphone is in one place in front of me. So I think they're probably the things to start with. And if you can invest in a giant monitor or multiple monitors, I would say they're the places to go and have a start. So I'm going to leave that one there. And if you've got other thoughts or ideas, of course, you can go and comment on those as well. Okay, yes, and Luis is saying audio is critical. It really is. It's much more important than video. You know, any old webcam will probably do, but your audio is the most important bit. So that's really important. Okay, what other questions do we have on this? Let me just scroll and see if I can find the ones voted for the most. And I think I've done answering on that one about tools. And what is the best way to measure effectiveness of training? That's another good one, Luis. What's the best way to measure effectiveness? That's a whole topic in its own right. And Will Tauheimer is the best person to go and speak to about that. I think it's bigger than your virtual classroom. What's quite nice with your virtual classroom is, or any kind of live online learning, is most systems will allow you to run polling. So you could ask questions in the session, just like giving people a sheet to fill in whilst they're still in the room. Also, what you can do is you can hyperlink out to SurveyMonkey or whatever it is that you want to use. Again, you can do that in the session time. There are various analytics that you can have on your software as well to tell you who joined and when. And all of that can be quite useful. In terms of the effectiveness of your training, that's a bigger subject than just virtual classrooms. And it's something to handle separately. So I'm going to wiggle my way out of that one, I hope. So do remember, you can use that question section to ask me some questions. What's been coming up in the chat? So we have a question about cameras. I'm going to start answering that one because I'm seeing the conversation going on in the chat about that as well. Kathy says, webcams can really impact the quality for large groups. We end up not using video except at the start to give that personal connection. And that's a really good way of doing it, Kathy, especially at the moment where it feels like the whole world is online. Bandwidth is being a bit of an issue. Hence somebody telling me my webcam quality wasn't great at the beginning, either for me broadcasting or for them receiving. That could have been an internet bandwidth issue. Do I recommend a camera? Yes, absolutely I do. In something like this, it's really important for you to be able to see me. And in some situations, for some types of training, that's going to be important to see the trainer all the time. It's also going to be important to be able to see your attendees, especially if it comes under that awful label of soft skills, where you really need to see each other for conversation and for meaning. And it can help with feeling of connection too, and reading the room a bit like you are face to face. You don't have to have it on throughout your entire webinar. You don't have to have it on throughout your entire virtual classroom as a facilitator or as an attendee. Often people can find that distracting. And also when you're looking at different parts of your screen, I'm looking into my webcam right now in the hopes that it's like eye contact. But if I look down at the chat and start reading that, that's different. If I look at my slides, if I look at my notes, if I look out the window to think, which I often quote, it's just like, it's just not such a great look. And so it can be distracting. And Kathy says, exactly, it's so distracting. I'm always looking at what's in the room. Yeah, and right now, I'll be honest, my webcam isn't even working properly. So normally I'd have it zoomed in much closer, so there are things that you can't see. So then you get into a discussion about backgrounds and virtual backgrounds, and that's a whole kind of other place to be. So thank you very much for that. So we've got a question from Jane. Jane says, what do you, A, love best about the virtual classroom, and B, least? Oh, good question, Jane. Thank you very much for that. What do I love best about the virtual classroom? What drives me and my passion, and it's taken me a long while to realize this, is helping people. And that's part of the reason why I called my company Lightbulb Moment, because I loved when I was teaching or training or facilitating people in groups, I loved the moment where you could see the penny drop, you could see the light bulb moment, you could see them go, ah, and it's helping people to have their light bulb moments. And the fact that I can do that virtually, so I can do that with the software that allows us to connect to each other, even though I'm in the UK, Jane's in a different part of the UK, Mike is in a different part of the UK, and we've got people from all around the world here. Well, actually, isn't that pretty awesome that we can get together, let alone the situation with the current kind of COVID-19, even before that, the fact that this software allows us to get together to reach people we wouldn't normally reach, I think is pretty special to be able to enable that. And what do I like least? Oh, you have been asking the most annoying questions, Jane, because I don't know what I like least. There are going to be those days where the tech goes wrong. I think that's probably when I get fed up, when I'm here and it all goes wrong, because tech does go wrong. But so did tech in my face-to-face classroom. The computer wouldn't boot, the projector wouldn't work, the aircon wouldn't work. Those things go wrong too. There's crashes on the motorway or the highway and people can't get to you. So I think it's that gets really frustrating. But it's about doing the best you can to learn around it and kind of move on from that. And Jane says in the chat that I've been helping her with the virtual classroom. It's been an utter joy. It's been my pleasure. And Kathy says, I've been doing instructional design and remote learning for years. It's been really great seeing and hearing new perspectives. Yes, Kathy. And there's different ways of achieving stuff as well, with that kind of idea of what do you love best about the virtual classroom. Well, it's like face-to-face. There's all sorts of different styles, personalities, options. There are people that deliver things in ways that I don't agree with, but they aren't wrong. They're just not how I like to do them. So I think that different perspective, Kathy, is really important. Thank you. Oh, these questions are coming in thick and fast. I think I need a drink. Roger says in the chat, I don't like that you can't read their faces. You ask what question anyone has and all you hear are crickets. Oh, Roger, really feel for you. And Roger, that's partly about design, I think, and partly about facilitation, partly about culture and things like that too. But if you design interaction from before they even log in, from the moment they log in to the moment you start, and if you have that interaction often, then that is really going to help you so that you don't get the crickets kind of feeling. So we have another question with 3 votes, this one. Louise asks, and lots of people like this question, so it's a good one, Louise. What is your preferred virtual training tool? Which platform? So which piece of software to use and have a think about? There are different ones. So there's things like Crowdcast, not a specifically virtual training tool, but you can use it that way. There's also, Adobe Connect. Obviously, everyone's heard of Zoom. There's the GoToWebinar, GoToTraining. There's Cisco WebEx, Cisco Meetings, and about a million others right now as well. I think when you think about the preferred tool, it's always about what is it that you want to achieve? What type of sessions are you delivering and who are you working with? So if your main consideration is we don't have much money, you need to go and find either a free or a low-cost tool. And that's one of the reasons Zoom has done really well. It's got a free version where you can use it. It's also got the paid-for version is £11.99, I don't know, maybe $15 a month, which isn't that much even for an individual freelancer to go and use. So cost is one factor. Also, ease of use is another factor. Again, Zoom is doing really well on this because it's so easy to use and people are picking it up. But then you get another factor, which is security. So most of you probably have heard of Zoom bombing. It's happened to me on a session and it was pretty horrible. I know of other people it's happened to. And Mike will go and share a link to our Zoom bombing information. We're sharing loads of updates there. So keep going back to that one. It will have some useful information for you. So security is an issue, and some companies now are saying we will not accept Zoom because of IT security and data security issues. So that's being a little bit of a challenge. There's things like WebEx, which or Saba Meeting, which are kind of usually part of bigger contracts, bigger kind of tools that are being used in a company. So that might be kind of really good to be able to use what you've got. And I often say to people, use what you have. If you've got Teams or you've got Skype for Business or whatever it might be, and that's what you've got, go and use it and make the most of it. It might not be the best tool in the world. It might not do everything you want, but that's the one you've got, so make the most of it. Also, there's Adobe Connect. I see Jane's talking about it. Eric's talking about it. And I think I saw Kathy say something. She said it's her favorite for actual training because it's persistent and all the layouts and the consistency. So you make a really great point there, Kathy. And it's my favorite for the same reasons. It's persistent in the sense that if I set up a room and call it Joe's training room, it's always there until I delete it. I set it up, I get it ready a day, a week, a month ahead of time, and it's always there, which is really useful. It's got layout, so if I wanted the chat window today, it's on the right-hand side. If I wanted it on the left, or I wanted it small or big, or 2 of them, I can do that. The breakout rooms are awesome on Adobe Connect. It is my personal preferred virtual training tool, but there are other things that work really well and for other purposes as well. So we try to be agnostic at Lightbulb Moment and use whatever tool our client is using and make the most of that tool and make it sing and be creative with it. But virtual classroom training, because of all the features in Adobe Connect, it's my go-to choice. So really good question. And Kathy says, great way to look at it. Yeah, those different options for different things are important. Thank you for that. We're coming up to about 25 minutes past. We were planning on running this for about half an hour, but you've got great questions and great chat. So I'm going to keep going for now, but Louise has given me a hard stop time. So I will stop at some point, I do promise. So another question we've got. So Kim asks, what are some of the most effective and new strategies for activities in virtual instructor-led training sessions? Like, how can role plays be done creatively, scavenger hunts, and so on? Oh, love this question, Kim. So the way I look at virtual instructor-led training, when we're thinking about activities and we're thinking about designing activities for our sessions, and especially if we're used to face-to-face, I say always start there. Always start with, what's the performance need? What do people actually need to do at work? After that, what is the thing in the session we're going to learn? What's the way we're going to do it? How we're going to deliver the information? What activity are we going to do? And therefore that will design maybe your role play, your scavenger hunt, or whatever other activity it is. The third thing is then, well, how do I do it in my platform? So the way that you do it in WebEx, Connect, Zoom, and any other tool might be slightly different. So yes, you can do things like role plays, because if you've got breakout rooms in your tool, then you can use the breakout rooms to go and put webcams on in Zoom or Adobe Connect, not in WebEx. And therefore you can run your role play just like you might do face to face. As long as you set up with people ahead of time, we are using our webcams today to make sure they've got one. They're happy with their background, they've done their hair, whatever it might be. And Kathy's saying it's a lifesaver for many activities. It really is. So then if you're thinking of other things, it's about being a little bit more creative. I had a conversation with a client today, and what they do is they do product training on physical products that you need to use in order to learn how to do those with your own clients. And so one of the things they thought about is, well, can we put together a particular package? So you'll use products 1, 2, and 3, and we'll send out sample versions for the training. And then another training session is about products 4, 5, and 6, and we'll send out sample versions ahead of time. So it's a little bit more planning. You've got to build it into the cost of that training session, but it's entirely doable. And years ago, when I first got into this, I remember hearing about people that were doing things like wine tasting virtually. And you know what? All of you guys are probably doing tons of inventive stuff right now, because, you know, you can just send things out. Why not send out the bottle of the wine of the week and then go and have that wine tasting online? So it's more about you knowing what the performance need is, what the learning objective is, and what the right activity is, and then understanding your platform. And then it's about your creativity within that. And you guys will come up with tons of amazing creative ideas, I'm sure. Thank you, Kim. That was a really good question. And Kim is saying, oh, people love samples. They really do. Louise asks the next question. Have you found that class size makes a difference in a virtual classroom environment? Such a great question there, Louise. Thank you so much for that. And yes, absolutely it does. So let me just go and have a look. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to jump to slide 11. That's why I typed in slide. That's why I typed 11 in the chat window. What I want to do here is show you the way that we look at virtual classrooms and webinars and class sizes. So what we've got here is the virtual classroom, and at Lightbulb moment we have up to 10 people in our virtual classroom sessions. It means it's really small. It means we can get to know individuals, we can tailor training to them, have the conversation with them, get to know them. We've got a webinar, which we say is 30 people or more. So that could be 30 people, 3,000 people, quite frankly. It could be absolutely loads. In the middle is the large virtual classroom. So the interaction is getting more broad for this number of people. So it means that, you know, like today, there's kind of 20, 30 of you here. I can't get to know individuals. I've got to know Kathy a little bit, and I'm thinking, okay, so I've got a bit of conversation going on there. Kim's asked some great questions, and Jane and Louise, but there are others of you that maybe aren't saying so much in chat, so I'm not getting to know you in the same way. What we really have here is something whereby the more people you have, the less connection you have. Hi, Jennifer. The less connection you have with individuals. And also you have less knowledge about the learning transfer. If I've got 10 people and we've done, let's say, a 2-hour session, and I've had good discussions with them, I've got stuff going on in chat, stuff on whiteboards, we've done some breakout rooms, we've had some conversations on audio, I've got a much better sense of, have they learned something? Are they really going to be able to do this when they get back to work, than I would do with 30 people. So that's how I look at class size. And what Mike has also done for you is shared a link to a blog where I share some research on that. So I think it really does make quite a difference. But in chat, please let us know what you think. You know, do you have a certain number of people that you limit things to? Do you, have you found a difference in the number of people that you have? And Mary Jean, you're saying, is there a replay of this session? If that's what you're asking, yes. So you're attending kind of the last sort of half of it or second third of it live, but also this link, a few minutes after we finished, you'll be able to watch from the beginning again. So you'll be able to do that without a problem too. So Susan says, we try to limit 12 for the virtual classroom. Yeah, between you and me, I tend to stretch to 12 in the virtual classroom if we need to, but not much more than that. And Kathy says, we try to keep class sizes for training at 20 or less. Anything over 20, we add a trainer assistant or subject matter expert. Really great. And we never go over 30. So you and I, Kathy, were in synchronization on that 30 people mark there then. So I think it's kind of, it depends on what you're delivering. It depends on the outcomes you're looking at from a corporate or learning point of view. But that's certainly how we look at things. So thank you very much for the question. We have another question from Martin. Martin, thank you very much. How do you stop webinars becoming information dumps and disengaging learners? Oh, what a really good question. And Mike has actually shared that I was presenting on a webinar with 500 attendees and still got them asking questions and going to comments in the chat. So it's about your design and it's about your delivery. So what I want to do is jump to this slide here. And what Mike will do is share a link in the chat to the facilitator guide template. So this is my template that I use when I'm running any type of virtual classroom, webinar, or even face-to-face session. I use this. And you can go and download the template. You can read about it. I'm not going to go into detail about it. You can read that on the blog. The key thing here for me is that I'm on each slide only for a short amount of time to maintain visual interest. And let me actually make that screen a little bit bigger so you can see it better. To maintain visual interest. Also, what you get here is the questions in red to say these are the questions to jump out. And you can see that I use things like chat or the arrow and so on to say, well, what part of the software are we using? So we've got a variety of options. We're not just green check, green check, green check. Actually, we're using chat, whiteboard, green check, audio, a different whiteboard, and we're mixing up the kind of interactivity we have. And this is the important thing. The other thing that we really need to make sure of is that we are getting people involved every few minutes. So even just on something like this today, which is ad hoc, it's Q&A, it's not a planned training session. Some of these questions that are coming up, I'm saying, what do you guys think? Tell us in the chat window, and reading some of those answers out. So Kim is saying the template's fantastic. Thank you, Kim. And I've updated it recently, actually, so that's really good. Kathy's liking the technical note, which is absolutely awesome. And Martin's saying it's looking useful. Thank you, Martin. And, you know, it's up to you to use it how you want to. For me, it's about, do I have a variety of interactions in here rather than the same interaction again and again? Am I involving people every few minutes? And also, am I making sure that my questions are really good? And I'm going to hold my hands up and say my questions aren't always right. We ran a session the other day, and right in the middle of the session, we kind of ran it, and everybody was a bit like, what do you mean, Joe? And I had to reword it. And then I highlighted it and went, okay, hands up. That was not a great question. I need to reword that one. I go and have a look at it. But the point is, you've got that interaction, and that's how you make sure they're not information dumps, is you focus very much on the learner, the performance, the outcome that you want. I think I saw Cassie pop up, Cassie Labori, a very good friend of mine, and we've worked together a lot. And I really picked up from Cassie this idea of what could they be saying instead of me? What could they be doing instead of me? And this is where we get to facilitation rather than training or teaching that information dump. So I would say shrink down the amount of information, increase the amount of interaction and activities. And that's what I would go for on that one, Martin, and start there. Kathy says, I tell my virtual trainers they should be pulling rather than pushing. Love that. And it is about facilitating and having that conversation. Neil, oh, hello, Neil. Lovely to have you here. Neil asks, which webcam do you use? It is a Logitech C920. There are newer versions. I think there's a 930 as well. Pretty good standard on those, so they're really good. But any webcam that you have is better than no webcam, or provided it's working, of course. But mine is the Logitech C920, and Kathy's saying it's the same as hers. Other webcams obviously do exist. Other software and platforms do exist too, but that's definitely the one that I'm using. Okay, thank you, Neil. Kim asks, really good question. With the rise of backgrounds and deep fake technology, is there an increased potential for learners to misrepresent themselves? Is there a liability for employers if it's mandatory training like compliance? There is a really good GIF meme kind of video that I saw the other day of your classic Zoom training, kind of your 4 windows with people in there, just sitting there in a normal meeting. And all of a sudden, for one of them, the picture, as it turned out, fell down of them, or rather than sitting there, like this, it actually fell away and they were in the background having a beer. And I think that's kind of a funny, humorous way of highlighting the issue that you're talking about. So some of this is going to be really good, this kind of background technology. If you're forced to work in your kid's bedroom and you've got bunk beds in the background, you might want the virtual background on just to be a little bit more professional and not worry about what's going on. But also, you're right, it can be the case that there are people on, I'm sure I saw it was on Instagram or Snapchat, that somebody was using so much of this deep fake technology that they look like a completely different person. And there is kind of a line that's possible to cross here. So I think there can be in the future a challenge for employers to know, have you really attended? If we've got these analytics that say you logged into the virtual classroom, for instance, does that mean you've actually done anything? And going back to that question that Louise asked about how do you measure the effectiveness, this is why, the bums on seats isn't the best analytics. Just because they logged in at 9 a.m. and logged out at 10 a.m. when we finished means nothing about their attentiveness, means nothing about what they took in and their learning transfer, and nothing about the performance later. So I think that's a really interesting one, and more to come on that in the future. Okay, so we are coming up towards 22. Luis gave me a hard deadline of an hour, so I'm going to carry on for a bit. If you need to get going, you can always come back to this link a little bit later on. But I'm going to keep going for now as the questions keep coming. And Kim, you're right, the value of the interactivity is really important. And if you're having good quality conversations and whiteboards and all that kind of thing, I think the bot will have to be really quite sophisticated to be able to mimic what a person would do. And if you're having good quality conversations, I would really hope that you'd be able to pick up when something is a fake in chat, for instance. You might not do that if there's 30 of you, but if there's 8 of you and you're having robust conversations, and I'd hope you'd be able to pick that up. But technology is really good, so we'll see where that goes. Luis asks another question. He says, you are great at facilitation. Thank you. Do you have any tips for successfully facilitating a virtual discussion like this broadcast? Oh, what a good question, Luis. So let's go to the chat first of all. In the chat, please share what are your tips for this. So what do you think makes great facilitation for a live broadcast? So what have you seen other people do on webinars, virtual classrooms? What do you do? Let's share some of those tips and see what we can get. Annette, hello Annette, says energy. You're absolutely right. Believe me, I had a cup of coffee before I started today, because otherwise, you know, you don't want somebody who's just sitting there a bit bored. You know, there's a time for calm and there's a time for passion and energy. Kim says, have a producer. Love it. Mike is an amazing producer for me and I get to boss him around, so that's always a good thing. And just in that sense of to go and help somebody with their audio, or maybe can you go and get this, the hyperlink or something, is really good. And Neil is going with the energy. Absolutely. If you don't have that energy, that va-va-voom, that passion, you're not going to breathe life into what you're doing. And you're not going to overcome that issue of the perceived barrier of the technology. Jane says friendly, welcoming, personal and caring. And those things are really important. Jane and I had a conversation recently about the importance of your own personality, your own style coming across in your training. I like to think I'm a little bit more lively, a little bit more passionate in my training. For other people and other circumstances, actually, it's better to be a little bit more calm, a little bit more reflective. So it's a little bit about the context as well as you as a person. Eric says familiarity with the platform. Yes. So you're not fumbling around. Really, really important. We all make mistakes and that's forgivable. And there are always technology issues and that's forgivable. But not putting the effort in the first place isn't. Susan says actively engaging participants, calling them out by name, asking for feedback. Yes. And it's so easy live online because Susan, your name is right there and I can see it and I don't even have to try and remember it. Louise says, I like how Joe regularly reads from the chat and involves audiences in the discussion. Louise, I love that you've pointed that out. It's one of the things that I think is absolutely key, because if I don't do that, what's the point in us being here live together? And I find it really annoying when I type something in that's not acknowledged by somebody. And it doesn't mean you have to say, oh, Joe, that's the most amazing point in the world. It can just be, you know, 5 or 10 of you have made great points or these answers. And also it's really, I think, quite frustrating if you've typed something in, especially in the moment or in response to somebody, and a minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes later, they look at the chat and they go, huh, what did that mean? What was in that reference to? And you're like, oh, it's gone now. So actually, that's really important to keep people involved, especially in your virtual classroom where you have fewer people. Practice is important. That's absolutely right. Somebody's saying that Mike is fab. Don't say that. It will go to his head, honestly. Kim says it's so difficult to keep up with the chat, but maybe activities or breakouts give you the chance to catch up. Kim, it really depends on how many people and what's going on in the chat. So the webinar that Mike said I did the other day had 500 people on it. There was no way on earth I was keeping up with that chat, especially when we asked specific questions in Adobe Connect. We had 2 chat windows on the screen. And I said, well, let's have your examples in these 2 categories. And honestly, those chat windows just went so quick. But what it's really about in that case, because it was such a big webinar, was going through and picking out and summarizing some of what's in there. But yes, some of those activities do give me a chance for that. So especially if I'm sort of using a whiteboard maybe, and also a bit less if I'm less on webcam. I'm quite aware of being on webcam today and how long it takes me to have a drink. But normally you'd have whiteboard activities where you want to wait for even 20 or 30 seconds. It's enough to look at my notes, look at the chat, have a sip of my drink, and move into the next thing. So even those really small parts of time can really help. Okay, so anything else in the chat about those tips? I think you've got some great tips there. What I would say is it's about planning really well. And that's why the facilitator guide that I use, that I shared with you, and you've got the template for, I find so good, because this keeps me within reason on track. Now, Mike will be the first to tell you I can be 10 minutes off, even 15 minutes off at points, but that comes back to my experience and skill as a facilitator and working with the group to bring that back on track. But by using this, it really helps me focus on the attendees, on the interaction, and on the activities that they need to do. And I don't want you to get the wrong idea that you have to script this. That's not what this is about. This is about your plan A that you then tailor with your group. And that's really, really important to have a think about that. So thank you very much for that question, Luis. And we've got a couple more questions, and I think it will be time to think about wrapping up. Neil asks, I have insurance for face-to-face, public and professional liability. Do we need for virtual workshops? I think yes, and I've got that, because what you're still looking at is you're still providing services, you're still providing expertise and advice that people may or may not follow. So yes, public professional indemnity insurance is still really important. One thing to consider with this is whether you're working within your region. So I know Neil is in the UK, or if you're working internationally, because if you work internationally, your insurance will change, because obviously legal systems around the world are very different. So I had quite a shock when I went from UK based to international in my insurance on the amount of money I was paying. But if you're working internationally, then that's something you have to do. So I think, yes, absolutely, because you're still in that situation of being an expert delivering advice on that. And the last question. So Ryan, thank you. What is your opinion of sponsorship of educational webinars? Do you see ethical issues arising from commercial sponsorship? It's a big income generator in this current climate. Really good question, Ryan. And if you've got comments or questions on this, please do share them in the chat. I think this goes back to any kind of session, whether it's a podcast, a face-to-face session, a conference. We really have to look at who are we working with, what signal does that send out, and how are we going to manage the implications of that. I don't see any reason why you can't have sponsorship for it, and sponsorship comes in all sorts of forms. As long as it's really clear and obvious, A, what you're doing with people's data, and B, what the relationship is, so people can make a decision about your opinion or your decisions, and you're upfront about that. I don't see any reason why you can't do that or why you shouldn't do that. It's a really good question there, Ryan. Thank you very much. So I have my last question here for you today. And my question for you is, what is it that you are taking from today? So any good training session obviously has to have some reflection. So please use the chat window. What's your light bulb moment from today's session? So what are you reflecting on? What have you learned? What's your light bulb moment from today's session? Oh, some really lovely things here. Thank you. Notice I used a little bit of silence there. You are allowed to be silent online. So the facilitator guide template, brilliant, Susan. Linda says, check out my insurance. Absolutely. Virginia says, maybe it's not as hard as I thought. Start small, start low, and build your confidence up, Virginia. Neil says, yes, the template. Jonathan says, how fab Mike is. Oh, all right, I suppose so. Yeah, he's been absolutely great in the chat. He always is. And thank you very much, Mike, for that. Martin said, copy down some of the links to articles, which I'll go and explore, plus the template. Thank you, Martin. Susan says, Mike is an awesome producer and he's got much love for all of you. Louise is saying the facilitator guide, and Eric is saying lots of things. Love the template, tips on engaging the audience. Brilliant, Eric. And Kim says there are too many. One thing is to save this URL for this recorded session to share when people ask me for live online training advice. Absolutely great idea, Kim. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. I've really enjoyed answering all of your questions. And thank you again to Louise and obviously the wider TLDC community. You're always very welcoming. And it's really great for you to be here. I'm sure Mike has already shared some resources. There he goes. You see, he's earning his money, isn't he? He's doing good. You can connect with me on Twitter. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can go and find me if you've got any questions. You know, do shout because I'd love to help you out. We've got our community as well, where you can always go and ask questions. We offer training out to all sorts of organisations in webinar and virtual classrooms. But just go and have a listen to our podcast if you want to upskill. So Luis, thank you very much. And he says, thank you. It's always great to have you on TLDC. Thank you for all of your questions, everybody. And also thank you as well for your comments in chat. It's been a really lively session. Thanks. Stay safe and have a good day.